From the building of faith, welcome to Celebration, a Christian talk and variety show with outreaches across the world via television, radio, internet, and social media. You'll hear from today's leading authors, preachers, singers, evangelists, songwriters, and local Christian leaders. Now here's your host, president and founder of Journey Network, Dr. J.T.Guyton.
So one of the very first memories I have of my guest today, when I was a boy, my parents had this vinyl record, and it had different artist songs on it, and the one song on there that I loved was called "Wonderful Time Up There," and none other than Pat Boone was singing it. Well, that's still probably one of my favorite songs that he does. But my earliest visual memories of Pat Boone was watching him on the PTL Club with Jim and Tammy Baker, who Jim's program now airs here on the network 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. But I remember one of the big pushes during that time was about abortion. And I believe you wrote a song about that, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, certainly did. Let Me Live,
That's
the
it.
anthem of the unborn child.
Yeah.
And Jim Baker and the folks at PTL made a wonderful video of that, as did Pat Robertson at CBN. They both made videos of that song. And it not only saved, who knows, only God knows how many
Right.
hundreds of lives,
Right.
if not thousands, but I've held some of those in my arms,
Oh,
babies who were allowed to live because they heard that song.
that is awesome. One of the things that Jim Baker was criticized the most for, and sadly it was within the church world, and that was for having secular entertainers from Hollywood on his program, and you were one of those entertainers.
Not only a guest, but a time or two I hosted
Yes.
when he had to be gone. Shirley and I, hosted for Tammy and Jimmy.
But what a lot of people did not know is while they were crucifying him for that, there was a lot going on out in Hollywood for the Lord that most people didn't know about. And I think that's probably what Jim was trying to do, was get that out so people could know that entertainers can love Jesus just like everybody who goes to church, every Sunday.
And right then in particular, yeah, it's what we call the Jesus movement.
Yeah.
When Christians in the entertainment field, yes, were coming public and becoming Christian, but also in the streets and in the rivers and even at the ocean side, there were baptisms going on and new forms of music we call Jesus music.
Yeah.
And I recorded a lot of it. When people say, "What is this Jesus movement?" I said, "It's Jesus moving." It's what it is.
There you go.
It's Jesus moving through this planet and this gratefully through this country,
Yeah.
and awakening young people if they were going to get quote religious, they wanted the real thing. They didn't want to just be churchized.
Right.
They wanted to be Christian.
Yeah.
And when they heard that Christians were, the first thing that happened when they became Christians was they'd get baptized. They wanted to be baptized. So they were being baptized in the ocean, in lakes, and like here in California, where many churches don't baptize anymore, they'd come over and be baptized in Pat Boone's pool.
Well,
We had over 300 baptisms in our pool.
wow. That's
It was,
amazing.
I swim every day in what is also a baptistry.
Come on now. That's good. Now, weren't you also, didn't you teach a Bible study to the stars at one time?
We were doing that periodically. I mean, I had to travel a good bit, of course,
Right.
and she wasn't quite comfortable handling it if I wasn't here. And this is where we are and where we did it. But yeah, right in our home, we were inviting entertainers who were not sure they wanted to go to a church.
Yeah.
Some had been in church earlier, like Jonathan Winters and Doris Day and others, and they had not had what they considered a great experience as growing up in those churches, some even
Right.
Catholic. But they would be willing to come to an entertainer's home like ours, knowing there would be no publicity, no pictures,
Right.
and that it would be just a collegiate, comfortable group, and that we would have a teacher,
Sure.
a good Bible teacher who would just share and answer questions. And we had a lot of well-known entertainers, including some that weren't entertainers, including one was Mickey Cohen, a gangster who came along with Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Okay. Wow.
And,
How about that?
and they sat and listened to some good Christian teaching.
Yeah.
And it wasn't publicized. It was not meant to be. And
Right.
there were those who said to me afterwards, this was different than anything I experienced in church. In church, it was all seeming like some kind of a ritual that I was not drawn to. But this was just people talking about Jesus,
Yeah.
and it became very real to me.
Yeah.
And some of those entertainers, and I'll respect them, and not necessarily saying who they all were and are, but I expect some of those are going to be in heaven now,
Absolutely.
thanking Shirley and me for letting them find out who Jesus really is, and they coming to know him.
Yeah. The term lifestyle evangelism gets a lot of negativity because people say, well, when you push lifestyle evangelism, you're pointing people away from the church. I personally disagree with that because I think lifestyle evangelism is what the Bible taught us to do, which is what you and Shirley were doing, having them in your home, because sadly, organized religion has really ruined a lot of people and caused a lot of people not to want to come to Jesus.
Well, the early church, that people are forgetting, I guess, was born in the streets.
Right. Right.
The church was born out in public, out in under the skies, and there on when Peter and the disciples came out speaking in tongues, people from 17 different nations were hearing it happen.
Yeah.
And 3,000 were baptized that first day out in the open. And
right.
That's what was happening out here in the 70s.
Sure. You were raised, if I'm not mistaken, Church of Christ.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So how did you come into this whole charismatic movement, and how did that happen to Pat Boone?
Well, like everything, every good thing that happened in my life is just the Lord, just Jesus sort of nudging me in a direction.
Right.
I was a Bible-believing kid. My dad, a building contractor and an architect, mom, a registered nurse, very practical professions. But I'm my brother and two sisters in the family unit. We often had Bible studies just around the kitchen table, even though we were in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday nights, faithfully in church, in the Church of Christ. But Daddy just wanted us to be aware as a family, the Bible and our history as recounted, that is spiritual history. And I knew right from the very beginning, because we started in Genesis right through the Old Testament. Some of it was tough going for us kids, and we might go through there and not stay in Leviticus or Deuteronomy very long.
Right.
but getting into the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the New Testament, which we understood more. But even then, we knew we were talking about Jews. This was a Jewish religion that we were learning about.
Right.
And people ask me today, why do you wear a chai, a Migin David, Star of David in the gym, where sometimes that's all I have on? And these guys, well, are you Jewish? And I say, yeah. Pat Boone, you're Jewish? Yeah, adopted. I'm adopted Jew, adopted into the family of God's chosen people.
Yeah.
And we knew that growing up. So when I was baptized, barely 13, I had read Matthew 10:32 or 10:38 for myself, where Jesus is saying on that last day, and this is a kid now reading, on that last day, he'll be separating the right from the left, the goats from the sheep. And if those who have confessed me before men or acknowledge my lordship before men in the presence of other human beings, I will confess before my Father in heaven. For those who have denied me, I'll have to deny before my Father in heaven. Right. Well, a barely 13-year-old kid can understand that.
Sure.
I knew that I needed to confess Jesus as my Lord and accept him as my Lord, and for people to know, out loud, that other people to know I am a Christian.
Right.
And that, that that caused me to be baptized almost immediately.
Sure.
After that, I was not a bad kid to begin with, but I mean, I was a normal kid and could have been influenced in any direction at that time. But I knew from then on that I was a child of the
Sure.
living God, and that certain things came with that knowledge, and that was expectation
Right.
that I try to live a life that would please my Heavenly Father and my Savior. And so I took that when I never dreamed I was going to be an entertainer. I was going to be a teacher preacher.
Okay.
But I did like to sing around my hometown of Nashville, and I knew all the pop tunes, and a piano player friend of ours would accompany me when I sang for ladies' clubs and businessmen's luncheons and stuff like that, and school programs. And eventually that led to a recording contract. And suddenly, after I'd married my wife at 19, when Red Foley, her dad, the Hall of Fame country performer, whose wife, Shirley's mom, had died of rheumatic fever, and he was taking his three daughters, including Shirley, to Springfield, Missouri to start the Ozark Jubilee. I just couldn't stand it. We'd already been in love since we were 16. And
Wow.
now at 19, he was taking her away. And I said, honey, why don't we get married? And we asked her dad, and he tearfully gave us permission. And then I didn't ask my own parents. They said, oh, no, no, no. You wait till you're through college before you get married. So we didn't ask their permission, but we married at 19. And at that point in the Nashville, Tennessean paper, we were known around town, both of us, because we were singers from around Nashville. Shirley Red Foley's daughter and me doing my own singing. And it said, singers wed, devote lives to God. And we
Wow.
had said to the reporter who asked us that what were we going to do? And I said, I'm going to be a teacher preacher, and we're going to serve God. And that's what was written about us in that first article in the newspaper. And those things were of God. I know they were putting a stamp on me that I had to respect.
Sure.
But I was identified as a guy who was not only a child of God, but I was going to be a teacher preacher to try to help other young people get to know the Lord.
Right.
He gave me a platform which I hadn't dreamed of,
Yeah.
which was becoming a pop singer and a rock and roller at that. And that's the way I began. And I knew from the beginning on
Sure.
that God had put me on a stage,
Yeah.
and I was to use that stage in whatever way I could to do what I was intending to
Yeah.
do, which was affect the lives of young people and try to point them to the Lord.
Yeah. There's a lot of platforms we can preach from. Doesn't necessarily always have to be behind a pulpit, does it?
Right.
I read in Ralph Emery's first book, it was called Memories, that when he first began his radio career in Nashville, Tennessee, that he would MC a TV program for a young teenager, and that young teenager was Pat Boone. So you had a TV program as a teenager, is this right?
No, it wasn't TV, it was radio.
It was radio. Okay.
Yes, I know that TV was just coming on strong then. I
Okay.
remember the first TV sets I saw were ovals, little ovals that not many people had.
Yeah.
And I was transfixed by that. But no, I was on a big radio station on
Okay.
Saturday mornings called Youth on Parade.
Okay.
And I was still a junior and a senior in high school, but interviewing other kids from Middle Tennessee and as far as the station reached. And they'd come in on Saturday mornings and perform, and a piano player named Frank Bobo, who could play anything for anybody,
Okay.
and he would accompany them. But they would play instruments, they would sing, they would read poetry, whatever they wanted to do. And it was not a contest. It was just interviewing and letting young people be heard and seen. And I was the MC. And Ralph, I'd almost forgotten, but he was a regular on that radio station. So of course he would introduce me.
Okay.
And then I would hear the radio show sometimes afterwards to hear how I sounded. And I became painfully aware of my Southern accent. I would say, well, I just can't believe that. I mean, C-A-N-T was not can't, but that's the way it came out of my mouth. And so I began to correct my English so I didn't sound quite so Southern. But yeah, that was high school. But I didn't think that was going to lead to anything other than just being a little more confident as a speaker,
Yeah.
and I could be a good preacher and a teacher.
But 45 million records, 38 top 40 hits, more than 12 Hollywood films, spending 220 consecutive weeks on the charts of Billboard magazine with one or more songs each week. Wow, that is a lot of music, sir.
It sure is. It was, I tell you, there was no way that it wasn't just God's favor,
Yeah,
because that statistic about almost 4.5 years
yeah,
without ever being off the single chart, the one who comes the closest to that record of achievement of contiguous weeks
right.
without being off is Elton John. His was 157 weeks, because
Wow.
most artists of major status, will let a record uh, just go on and on till it drops off the charts before the next record comes out.
Yeah,
But that was not the MO of Little Dot Records out of Gallatin, Tennessee, where I first began to record.
yeah,
And as soon as a record dropped from number 1 to 7, out came the next record. If it only went as high as 30 and it dropped to 35, out came the next record. So I already had a new record coming up while the one was going down. And that kept the momentum alive.
right.
And frankly, I was not aware of that. I only went in the studio and recorded when Randy Wood bade me come over. Hey, we got to do a new record.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do it. What is this song we're doing? Or these songs? I wouldn't hear them till I got to the studio.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't have them in advance to bone up or boon up on them. Boning up was like booning up for me. And so I would hear the songs and then learn them while the band was running over what they were going to do. And then we'd do 2 or 3 or 4 takes on
Yeah,
the song. If we didn't get 3 finished records in a 3-hour session, we were just wasting money.
wow.
And it was all monaural too. You couldn't punch in and do some of it over again. You either had to do the whole thing again. I would do a song and I'd get hoarse singing a rock and roll song. And then I think I had it really nailed. And Randy would say, no, the trumpets didn't, or the trombones didn't play, or the drums were off, or you missed a word, or we got to do it again. I said, oh, I can't do it better than that. But we either took the one where I left a mistake in because it had the overall best sound,
Yeah,
or we did it again, and I just did it the best I could again and again.
sure.
So this was a learning experience, learning as I went.
Right.
But little did I know, I wasn't keeping up with it. I didn't know till years later when Dick Clark did a lot of this kind of back analyzing, and recording records. The stats, the statistics is what I'm looking for. And he would ask somebody on the TV station, who do you think's whose record was number one or on the chart on the charts longer in number of weeks or months? Hey Jude by the Beatles, Don't Be Cruel by Elvis, or Pat Boone's Love Letters in the Sand. And I always thought it was one or the other two, but in every case, it was Pat Boone's Love Letters in the Sand or Pat Boone's record of this or that, more than Elvis or some of these other major artists. So
Sure.
he was a genius, and I got the benefit of his genius in picking material and timing and marketing and promotion. I had all this. All I had to do was go in the studio, sing the song as he put it in front of me, and go home.
Wow.
And after he did the rest.
Yeah. That's someone who knows what they're doing, right?
Yeah, really. And boy, I miss him.
Out of all the songs you've recorded, what's your favorite one?
Well, I'm asked that a number of times, but it's hard to say because different songs I would choose,
Yeah.
different meanings. One, of course, Exodus, the words, which is the second Jewish national anthem. This land is mine, God gave this land to me. And I wrote those words to Ernest Gold's melody of that song from the movie Exodus about the rebirth of the nation of Israel. Well, that is a huge record, and it's considered the second Jewish national anthem.
Wow.
My record of it and my writing of it on the back of a Christmas card
Uh-oh.
one Christmas Eve is on the wall of the righteous Gentile at Yad Vashem in Israel, along with Oscar Schindler and Corrie ten Boom and other Christians who
Yeah.
befriended and helped Jews during the Holocaust
Sure.
period. And my song of Exodus is right there now. As a kid from Nashville, writing the second Jewish national anthem. Well, you'd think that would make it my favorite song ever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
April Love, my wife, her birthday was April 24th, and love of my life, humanly. And that was the title song of my second movie and a huge #1 record. And so, of course, that has to be one of my very favorite records. And then even Wonderful Time Up There that you mentioned was a #1 gospel song in the middle of all the rock and roll that I was having at the time, and Elvis and all the other artists, you know, all the other artists like Chubby Checkers and all the artists of doing rock and roll.
Right.
The middle of that was everybody's going to have religion and glory. Everybody's going to be singing that story. Everybody's going to have wonderful time up there. Oh, glory, hallelujah. And that record went to #1 and stayed there
Wow.
for a long time in the middle of rock and roll. And I had the first #1 or million selling hymn album called Hymns We Love,
Okay.
which I recorded in the 50s.
Yeah.
And before Tennessee Ernie and others had big selling Christian songs and albums. But because I knew the teenage kids would buy whatever I was recording.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
I recorded an album, Hymns We Love, songs I'd been leading in church, in the Church of Christ, growing up as a teenager. And I recorded them with music. And we didn't have any instrumental music in the Church of Christ, but
Right.
now I'm recording with full orchestra and sometimes choral backgrounds, but doing these songs for kids that never heard them. They didn't go to church. They didn't know about those songs. So I was using the platform. Now this makes me sound like I'm really super religious nut or something. No, I was just practically in what I considered practical ways using this incredible platform that the Lord gave me. And I was enjoying thoroughly
Sure.
being a popular entertainer, of course. But I was raising 4 girls too, and I had 4 teenage girls at the same time. And if that doesn't make you pray a lot, then you just don't know.
I can
You don't
imagine.
know.
But it kind of goes back to that lifestyle evangelism, though. When somebody has Christ in their heart and they love the Lord, whatever they do as an occupation or whatever career they're in, they're going to find ways just to let others know that who Jesus is and that he lives in them. I think when he's in you, he's naturally going to come out.
Has to.
Yeah.
You can't really, you have to strain yourself to restrain. To restrain, you have to constrain, but just to talk about the Lord when you talk, you're talking to people that need him and need to know.
Sure.
And so I would try to, I know that could turn some people off.
Yeah.
It depends on how you do it. But what I would often do is say, well, that happened to me, or in my experience, it's this. And I wouldn't say, well, you need the Lord or you need to be saved. Well, I was talking to a guy once in front of a hotel, and out walked Doc Severinsen from the Tonight Show, and he was a Christian. And I was talking to Doc, and a Christian came out of the hotel. Pat Boone, Doc Severinsen, you need to tell Doc he needs to get saved.
Oh.
And that's not the way you do it.
Right. No. That's the way you run them off.
Yeah, right. And of course, Doc said, well, I'm already a Christian. I had a cow milking contest with him once on the Tonight Show. I know this is off the subject,
That's
but
okay.
I'm prone to get off the subject. But Doc Severinsen and I were good buddies, and he led the orchestra on the Tonight Show. And he talked about more than once about growing up on a farm and being a cow milker. Well, I talked about it too when I was with Johnny Carson another time, and that I too milked a cow, and my brother and I took turns milking the cow Rosemary. And before I even went to high school in the morning, I'd have to go out and milk the cow so he and I and the family had our milk. And so he said, well, you and Doc should have a cow milking contest. And we did on the Tonight Show. And the Carson Show had a cow that had not been milked that day, brought out and tethered in front of the curtain on the Tonight Show.
Oh my God.
And Doc Severinsen had the band ready to play this rollicking fast moving, da 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 da. No, not that. Some fast moving song. That sounds like a Marine hymn or something. No. And anyway, he said, play for 60 seconds, and we'll each milk the cow for 60 seconds, a minute, and see how much milk we can get.
Okay.
And he went first. I don't know why, but he went first. And so the band is playing for him, the melody, and to 60 seconds, and then he gets about a quart of milk. Then I sat down and I got almost a gallon.
Uh-oh.
And what he didn't take into account was when you first start milking that cow, it takes a few tugs before the milk really starts coming.
Uh-huh.
He handicapped himself literally by going first.
Wow.
And I really visibly outdid him milking the cow on the Tonight Show. He never got over it.
I bet.
But I think Doc was a Christian. I hope so.
Yeah. Johnny Carson was a great interviewer, wasn't he?
Very, very good. Because what he did was listen.
Yeah.
And he and Larry King the same.
Yes.
Some interviewers want to do most of the talking.
Right.
And they, even if they know a lot about you, they'll tell you things that you know about yourself, just so you know they.
We are so glad you have been with us for this program. Our prayer is that today's show has been a blessing and an encouragement to you and your walk with the Lord. This ministry is continually reaching out to spread the good news of Jesus Christ to all the world. We need your love gifts and prayers to help keep this ministry on the air 24 hours a day. So call us at 1-833-963-5433 or write us at Journey Network, P.O. Box 1420, Atmore, Alabama 36504. Or you can contact us online at journeynetwork.live. If you would like to have JT come speak to your church, conference, or event, please visit our website and go to the Event Scheduling tab. Thank you for your continued support. And remember, God loves you, and we do too.